It's Eve 2020. May 19th. Sorry, May 18th. Yes, I got ahead of myself. May 18th, 2020. This is Matterall. I'm here by myself, so I'm going to go through some of these stats. I'm going to look at the usual, and we'll see if there's something after that. I'm going a bit early today because there is a press-only screening or meeting for some of the stuff that's come up in Triglavian space. You will see the same presentation a few days later on the 20th. That's a couple days. And then everybody will know. But I'm under embargo to talk about any details, so I won't be talking about it publicly or privately, actually. Okay, let's have a look at the PCU to start, just to see how many people are coming into this game at the same time. And as you can see, it's really good for Sunday. The weekends have been really good for EVE Online, but the weekdays too. But clearly, a lot of people are at home. But 42,000 is fantastic. And if you look at the last week or so, right here you have a dip. Let's start at the beginning. It was trending up since March. It stabilized at about 40,000, and it kept hitting 40,000 on the weekends, which is quite good. And then you had DDoS attacks or server, I think it's DDoS attacks. Maybe server issues, I don't know. And that really took the wind out of that week. But it came back with a vengeance. It hit 40, trying to get right on there. Yeah, it hit about 41,500. And then this last weekend, look at this. Saturday, 40,000. Sunday, let's see, it was 41 something. I can't land on it, but it was again 42,000, which is good. Putting that in perspective for those of you that think EVE is having a rough time, it's not. There are probably less bots playing this game than ever. Now, when we had like a golden age, where's this? How do I open this up? This is interesting. When we had a golden age of EVE Online, I've explained this before, we were really bouncing between 50 and 60,000. That was when a lot of players, perception-wise, were on. But, and it was fun. It felt like the game was growing, expanding, and all this other stuff. But it was on a decline since then. All MMOs have been on a decline since about 2013, which is a highlight. You can see that year is the big year here. Too many games that started satisfying the same client base came out. You had mobile games starting up. You had open world games get significantly larger. There were just definitely some alternatives to playing an MMO. So they all lost a lot of steam, and EVE lost a lot less than everybody else comparatively. I'm talking, you went from WoW might have been, I believe it got up to 11 or 13 million players, and it came all the way down to like 7 million. So everybody lost a huge percentage. EVE did too, and then right about here in November 2016, it went free to play, and you can see that giant spike. I'll move out of the way, or I'll zoom in actually. See that big spike there just about overnight. It went right back up to 43,000? No, 51,000. Way up there. So it went from like 32,000, and there was pessimism. I remember this time. When they went free to play, it just went up to like 51,000, and everybody was celebrating. But we all knew it was just a sugar rush. Like, you're going to get all this huge spike. And some people thought, I think Astrothi thought it would get up to 1 million players or something. It was kind of funny, and I was like, it'll probably die down. When I saw that it jumped to the 51,000, I was actually very unimpressed, and I thought, this is terrible. Like, it should be higher than that, but it only jumped like 20,000 players. But I think it was Noisy Gamer that said, you want a high spike because it's going to come down. And he was right. And slowly over time, it came down. They got back to a little over what it was normally. So the alphas did not add that much to EVE Online. And then it's been up and down since then. As you can see, it goes through cycles of summer and winter, because that's just how EVE Online is. A lot of the players are European, and their winters keep them in and have them doing desktop stuff. But during the summers, they go out and live life and enjoy those summers. So summers are slow in EVE Online. Whereas Reddit, or REve, is actually very popular during the summer, because that's how people keep in touch with it while they're out doing stuff. But then when winter comes, the wars begin, the people begin to come back. Reddit actually goes down in popularity, and EVE Online, actually playing EVE Online, gets more popular. And you can see those cycles and these humps, and that's always been the case. But if you look at this year, it's really, since a low point in August, which would be post-Blackout. They lost some players to Blackout. They also lost some players to WoW. Classic WoW came out at the same time Blackout was ending. And a lot of players said, well, I'm going to go back to WoW and do the quests that I never did because I came in too late or whatever. But there's a combination of things that happened there. And it got pretty anemic, down to like the 26,000. So again, I don't think that was because of Blackout. I think that was because of other things. And one of those was WoW I think took a bite. And I know this just anecdotally, because a lot of people that said I'm out of here were all going to WoW, and a lot of them stayed there, including some, a lot of PvPers. Oh, sorry, Spod. You couldn't hear me on Discord because I wasn't pushing the button. Sorry. Hold on. There, voice activity for all. Yeah, so, and that's right. Nick says that 25,000 playing a video game that's been around this long is remarkable. And there's a couple things to point out. One is, yes, of course, it's remarkable that people are playing EVE Online 17 years after it started, right? That's a pretty substantial achievement on its own. Very few other games of the same timeline have anywhere near that many players. The second thing is, it's the MMO genre in general has really deflated quite a bit. So has, we were talking about this the other day, role playing. People said role playing has been down. I don't know if that's true or not, but I do know that there's so many alternatives to social media, and video games are a social media, that it surprises me that this many people inhibit EVE Online. So you can see why CCP is considered a unicorn. It is considered an anomaly. It's unusual to have a game going this long. It's unusual to have to still be around without a really, really specific niche group of a few thousand players. This has tens of thousands of players. A lot of them are global. And so it's already unique in that respect. And the reason this is important, it's not flexing, right? We're not saying like EVE Online's like an amazing game based on the statistics. The reason it's important is because people make investments in time, and you want to make an investment in something that's going to pay off. There's nothing worse than putting a bunch of investment into something that goes away. So you want to make sure EVE's going to be around. I think clearly they're one of the few companies that can keep going as long as they have. The other thing is they've innovated constantly with their graphics, and that meant that they had to get rid of some things. So they actually had to get rid of captain's quarters, so they didn't have to have so much weight when they develop. They've got rid of pause code that they built, stuff that really couldn't scale very well. They couldn't build to it. A lot of that stuff has been, and I don't know if it's been written out of the game, but it's been made obsolete. There's still pauses in the game, but you're getting to the point where a lot of that stuff can be worked around. And I'm not a programmer per se, but I know that code connects to one another. Different things connect to different things. And so when you change one thing, You have to test to see how it affects the 7 things that it touches. And the more things that you have that touch something that you change, the more QC's involved. The longer it takes, the more things break. There's all kinds of things. So when they take out something like Captain's Quarters, they didn't have to. That was one place they didn't have to QC when they were making changes to the game, and that was their reason for taking that out. Okay, let me read some stuff from the audience here. Roleplay isn't down. In my opinion, many are playing MOBA to get their PvP fix. No need to make friends. Just log in and go. That's an interesting point. I could go on about that as well. I started playing on the side a new game called, it's not new now, it was new in last fall. But I kept my eye on it, read about it. I was very interested in it, and I just decided to finally try it out. And it's called Death Stranding. It's on the PS4. I think it's coming to PC on July 21st. And they do social gaming in an interesting way. We'll talk about that after the stats. Let's talk about EVE Online. All right. So EVE Online doing really well, very healthy. I forgot to say, the part of this incline here is Korean localization. So not only do you get more players in the game at the same time, it no longer has peaks. Like this is a PCU, which I think is peak concurrent users, right? That means how many players at the same time are on. And you used to have these spikes that were 40,000, 50,000, but that meant they were all playing at like European time zone. 1800 was when all those people were on, let's say. And then the rest of the week, the rest of the day, it was just kind of a downward slope. I want to really zero in on this point because I think it's important. Let's just go to a random. You see how high that peak is compared to the trough that comes down here? It goes all the way down to 18,000 players. If you were on the West Coast like I am of the United States, when you logged in at, let's say, 10 o'clock at night after you did your real life, there was only 18 to 20,000 players. But if you were logged in European time, you were up to like 42,000. That's a huge difference. Now let's go look at these days where you have Korean nationalization, you have Chinese players, and that trough isn't nearly as deadly. It comes down to, we look here, 24, 25,000. Can get as low as 21, but that's deep Australian time. But right here, this area, like 24, 25,000 is compared to 18 or 20,000. And this is going up to 38,000. So it's, you can see those numbers are a lot closer. In other words, a lot of players still play European time zone, but now you have players playing on a different part of the globe that before weren't there. And that's nice. You have an even time zone spread, or more even time zone spread. So in this one, you had 41,000. And let's see, this is right here. This is Saturday. So that's a good day to measure. So you had 39,000 playing. This is last week. You still had DDoS attacks. And then in the evening, you had 27, 29,000. That's really good. And it's really important that players play the game in different time zones. Otherwise, you get really ugly gameplay like time zone tanking, where the only time anyone can actually fight is European time zone. So that's when all the fights are planned. And if you don't want to fight, all you do is you create your vulnerability states for your structures deep into the night when there's only a few thousand players on. And so that's why that's important. So not only do you have a nice trend of players coming back and, you know, the numbers going up, but you see a nicer spread. And that's something I wanted to get across. Let's look at the most violent systems in the last 24 hours. Wait, before we do that, EVE has one of the biggest RP communities in many ways. In many streams, you hear people role-playing pirates, scammers. They go to war against each other and curse at each other. And then they go out and have a beer afterwards. I think the stigma of being called a role player is still strong. That's blissfully watching. We talked about this.
It depends how you define role player, doesn't it?
Yeah. Let me turn you up, Spot. Yeah. That's something we talked about yesterday, actually, with some people who'd been players of EVE Online in the past, really legendary players, Shadu and Mr. V, and we had Headliner on there who's a legendary player too. He's still playing, though. He's the head of Pandemic Legion and longtime FC for them. And we also had Villy, who's head of Test Alliance and the leader of the Legacy Coalition. And he's been playing a long, long time as an FC. He played for Goonswarm first, and then he moved over and played for Test. And they basically brought them back to life. So those 4 guys on yesterday's Sunday show were around, and they talked about, this came up, they talked about having a beer and letting the leaders of different alliances and coalitions become friends, and was that good for the game? And Mr. V and Shadu agreed that it was probably not good for the game because it takes an enormous amount of work to put together a campaign and to motivate people to do a thing. Enormous amount of work. Most of that work is on the backs of FCs who have to do all the planning, the logistics. Not only are they taking the reputational risk of going out there and fighting and being the FC of a certain fleet that got whelped or whatever, but they also have to do a lot of the planning and the logistics and figuring out how they're going to attack a thing, and it just takes an enormous amount of effort. And if you kind of like somebody and you're having a beer with them, do you really want to engage in taking over their territory? Some people might say, yeah, because, it's a game and you have to do that sort of thing. But part of defeating an enemy is not just defeating them in the game. There's a big part of it, and that is defeating them psychologically. So what you need to do is degrade your opponent's reputation. So you make that FC on the other side as unpopular as possible. And that takes a lot of character assassination and memeing and just generally trying to dislodge people's favor of that FC so that those guys won't want to log in with that FC because he's not respectable. And that's hard to do against somebody that you have beers with because you're damaging them in a personal way. What do you think, Spod?
I understand why it's effective and why people did it. It just seems it is a line that isn't necessary to cross. Do you really need to destroy an alliance's faith in their FCs just because you destroyed the reputation? You should destroy their reputation in game on the battlefield, not in propaganda.
Yeah, well, you would think, but Eve has a lot of psychological warfare components to it because you can't defeat anyone in this game. You can only break their will to play the game. And you can't destroy an alliance. You can only fragment their will to play with each other. And so the more you basically paint them as somebody that you don't want to cooperate with, the more likely they are to not have the people they need to do a thing. And that's how you win wars in EVE Online, unfortunately. Because it's a video game and because you can't actually stop anyone. You will never defeat a group that wants to stick together. There's no way to defeat them. They will reemerge at some point in some way, unless you continue to put pressure on them. And even if you were to put a year's worth of pressure, if that group wants to stick together, you haven't defeated them. They're going to log in and they're going to do stuff. So that's why you break apart and you cascade an alliance of corporations that lose trust in each other or lose morale in each other.
Well, we have a case study for this, don't we?
What's that?
The war against the Imperium back in, I don't know what the official name is, the Casino War, the Money Badger War, whatever you want to call it.
World War B.
Goons were
the one that's popular.
Effectively destroyed. They were, they lost their space. They were battered, but as a group, they still existed because they still wanted to play together. And now they're back, and they will probably never go.
Yeah, as long as there's an interest to stay together and to play together, you cannot defeat them. The only way you do that is through psychological warfare, which is why I think this is why INN exists. This is why TMC exists for the Imperium. I think it's the stated reason. This is not some secret. But the gaming press was giving Matani a bad name after his wizard hat incident, and he thought, well, gaming press is terrible. They're giving us a bad name. They're making me unpopular. They may be endangering our will to stay together, so we have to fight back. So we're going to create our own gaming news site. And it was a gaming news site, not just an EVE Online news site, called TMC, thematani.com. And that was meant as a way of putting out their narratives, putting out their story, so they weren't at the whims of gamer press. You know, people talking about EVE Online, not EVE Online writers necessarily, because you could deal with those. They were considered opponents. But we're talking games press, like, websites that talked about MMOs and then would publish articles about EVE Online. And so that was really a defensive move. And then when EVE News 24 kind of deteriorated and fell apart, you had really Crossing Zebras also was kind of more of a boutique writing area, but those two were seen as in-game competitors, so they could already be dismissed by their members. So I think that's one of the reasons, like, you don't just play in the game with your people building structures and defending themselves. You actually defend psychologically people messaging to your members, which is something they do effectively. Unfortunately, the way that they do it, for me, in my taste, I don't like, because they create strawmen to attack. So they're constantly the victim, and they're constantly fighting back against somebody. Sometimes it's people in games, sometimes it's personalities in the media, and sometimes it's CCP itself. And that's how they keep their people unified. Which, if you think about it, is kind of an alt-right tactic. This is something Olmeca was onto when he was writing his thing. Am I right about that, or am I wrong? Because I'm not that knowledgeable about alt-right or anything.
Depends. Like, it's not necessarily. You could argue it's from both sides of the political spectrum if you're going to go down that route. But there are sort of like known tactics, if you want to call them that are used by fringe groups. It's things like. Can't think of anything to my head, but it's all about like bringing people down to a certain level and beating them essentially, so that they can't argue against you. So you protect your reputation by doing that.
So let's see, why is that? Oh, I see. Okay, sorry, something looked weird. So you think it's done by both? Well, anyway,
to a certain extent, absolutely, yeah. It's just
when
let's just say one does it more publicly than the other.
When your guys are victims, you're able to lash out in a stronger way because you're only defending yourself. And so you just have to figure out, like, who can you paint as somebody who's oppressing you. And I think that's when you start characterizing opponents. And if they're not quite opponents, then you make sure you find ways to make them opponents, and that's a big deal. And that does happen in EVE Online. I know it. I've seen it for many years.
I actually had a conversation about this yesterday with an FC. I just happened to ask him because I saw he was pinging for a fleet as they do, and they kept saying like weenies forming instead of the enemy is forming. They kept calling them weenies, and I was just like, I don't get it. Why do you always call them weenies? And it's all about building this narrative, building that they're the baddies, they're the dumb ones that are stupid and they don't know what they're doing, and their FCs are incompetent and all these bad stuff. That it's not true. Of course, it's not true. They're just as good as you are, but you have to keep telling your members that they're bad and they suck and their leader is a dick or whatever.
Yeah. Yep. You have to you basically have to keep people's tensions up. So why are we talking about all of this? We're talking about Now, EVE Online, when you come together at a meetup and you have a beer, and it's kind of fine because you're all EVE Online players, and that's true. And that's great to celebrate that, especially what I would call the aristocracy of FCs or leaders. You know, they come to a convention and they're famous people. They're famous, so they walk through, you know, like a headliner, and everybody wants his attention. Everybody wants to tell him a joke, and everybody wants to hang out with him. And that is just part of a social media with a hierarchy of visibility. So these guys, you know, they all understand that, you know, what it's like to be famous in the game. And so when they group up, they have something in common. And it's also, I've seen this a lot in Hollywood. There's a whole status game that's played that is who you can get to come to your event or your party, and whose party you get invited to tells people where you are in the social ladder. So if I'm a janitor and Jack Nicholson were to come to my party or something, I wouldn't just be a janitor. Everybody would want to know how that was even possible. Or if I'm a janitor, I guess janitor is the right word, and I get invited to Jack Nicholson's party, people would be interested. Would they think like, is this guy related to Jack Nicholson? How is it possible that this guy is here? It's not really, you know. I think that happens in EVE Online. It's who approaches you to talk to you versus who you approach to talk to tells people what your social status is. And there's some of that goes on whether people know it or not. So again, when people get together and it's a bunch of EVE players, some people are fine. Everybody's just talking because they're all humans and fine. Like Elise Randolph talk to anybody. Grath will talk to anybody. This is just people who talk to anybody. There are other people who stay more exclusive because too many people want their attention. So you'll see them kind of hide or, you know, be around, or they'll only be surrounded by their people. Or I'm talking about Celine and MC. You know, he's not out walking around talking to people. He's surrounded by his people, and they sit where everybody could see them, but they sit together, and he's insulated from that kind of stardom and stuff. But then you get other people again, like Annalise Randolph or Carnero. So it's kind of just enjoying people and walking around. So it's not saying anything about the people. It's just different ways of EVE Online players handling themselves in big groups. So when they meet and they have drinks together, and that actually reminds me, I don't know if anybody knows this story, but I was working with INN at the time, and I went to Mercenary Coalition's party. They had the private suite, they had the party, and I got invited up, and so I went up. I took, I think, Marana with me from Goonswarm. She's their lead diplomat, and I think there was a couple others, like 3 or 4 of us. We went up there, and it was fine. We were talking to people, meeting people, and everybody was nice. But then Matani came in after us, not with us. And a lot of the MC guys stopped and looked and were like, hey, look who's here. So it was this moment of fame. And so a lot of the MC guys were actually impressed that Matani was there. But then
the space celebrity stuff is fun.
Yeah. And so Matani's like, well, I'm not going to talk to these MC guys because they're just line members. Where is the leader of this place? Because that's who I want to talk to. And so he's like, you know, where's Celine? He used his real name, of course. And Celine just was like, just ran into a bedroom and was hiding. Like he didn't want to talk to Matani. So it was like, what's going on here? There's definitely like some kind of mental combat going on that I'm not understanding. But yeah, so it was like, it was interesting to see those old personalities and how they interact. But again, going back to when players meet up and it's EVE Online and you're at a party and you're having beers with everyone, that's great. The problem is if you become too friendly and you really like each other, like Shadu and Mr. V were talking about, it becomes very difficult to want to harness or to assassinate their character, to make them look so bad that their own players don't want to follow them. That's hard to do. So you need to do that to people that you don't meet, that you don't like, that you depersonalize, and that's how that works. Okay. Spot, you got anything else on this? I'm going to read some comments from chat. I want to try to make this a little more interactive.
I was just thinking of a recent experience I had, sort of because of yourself, where somebody on this show once or twice. I know I'm not space famous by any stretch of the imagination, but they knew that I had spoken to you in the past, and they were like the Matterall bad guy. I was like, well, yeah. I mean, I'm not being demeaning, but he's just a guy. Go say hello.
Not even.
There's this magical, like, scary Halo people have around, names that they know of. I suppose I had the same thing. Like, I'd never spoken to goblins before, but I just DM'd them in Discord, and he's just a guy that will just talk to you, you know?
Oh, he's a cool guy. Like, Matterall isn't even a cool guy, but Goblin's a quality guy.
But it's just, I was one of those people that, like, looked at the big names with starry eyes, thinking they're magical people that don't associate with us mere humans. But no, once you get yourself out there, you realize that just say hello. People will talk to you.
Yeah,
as long as you don't walk up to them, you know, like hands cupped, saying, "Please, mighty Matani, sir,
well,
may I have your blessing."
What happens is that people don't know how to approach someone like Elise. I'll use myself as an example, actually a very good example. When 7-8 years ago, when I wasn't doing any media stuff, I was just a player like any other player. But I was reading a lot about people, and there was Elo. I think I was trying to apply to Black Legion. So there was Elo in the public channel, and there was Elise Randolph. And I said, oh, it's Elise Randolph. And it was kind of like, ooh, Elise Randolph is here. And he was like, what's wrong with Elise Randolph? It was really funny. It was very sweet, actually. Kind of like, yeah, I'm here. You don't have to be mean to me to get my attention, because you can't just say something because you think you're not worth talking to. You know, there's that weird counterplay where you're just mean to somebody that's popular because you have nothing to say. And you're afraid that anything you say isn't worth it, so you have to come up with something that's just kind of mean. And so I was like that with Elise when I first bumped into him. And now I realize he's one of the nicest guys in the world. So, like, why would I, my tone was so wrong for that moment that I didn't even realize it at the time.
Vordo in the chat mentioned something that is, again, I witnessed the other day, and it's embarrassing, and I don't understand how how can you change people's attitude to improve this, because it's awkward for all sides. The example I'm thinking of is there was a formation for a fleet or something like that. There was like 30, 40 people in a voice comms channel, and they're just talking regular stuff about what's going on in their life while they're still getting up for this fleet. And someone joins, and they're female, and the first thing you get is all the guys going, "Oh, hey, it's you. I missed you." Like, come on, they're just a person. Treat them like a human being. I just hate that kind of thing.
Gender changes everything. Torvald's another really nice guy. So if you ever meet him, super nice. And they're, again, Eve players, when they meet each other, they have that to rally around. Like, you can go to a meetup in EVE Online, and you can always ask, hey, who do you fly with? That's just an opener. And they're likely to tell you. And even if they're joking with you and lie, they're still not going to treat you too badly, because we all kind of are fans, right? Like, it's almost like, hey, if you're in this room, you can't be that great, you know, like, we're all EVE players. So there's at least that baseline. Well, unless you meet a celebrity like DJ or Sam Jackson used to play EVE Online, or Henry Cavill, I think, played EVE Online.
You just got a big spicy raid by the looks of it.
Did I? Okay. Oh, yeah, thank you. I can't see it. It must be... Well, anyway.
153 guys from Ushla.
Oh, Urschlock. Great streamer, actually. I wouldn't say he's underrated because people love him, but he is definitely someone to go and watch. Okay, enough about the psychology. I just wanted to talk about that. We may not be able to go through the numbers that well because I have to run in about 10 minutes. There is, as I said at the beginning of the show, CCP is putting on a demonstration for media on some things, and there's an embargo on the content of what gets talked about until they go public in a few days. On the 20th, there'll be something going on. So, yeah. Thanks, Urslag. Appreciate it. I'm telling you, Urslag, I hear great stuff about you. And Torvald, everybody knows Torvald's a great personality for streaming as well. So, good people doing good Eve work, showing you the gameplay. We don't show you the gameplay, because I'm on a Mac and I can't stream the game and Mac at the same time and OBS at the same time. So I may end up having to get a new machine just so I can stream properly and do some gameplay stuff. Because we used to do, I don't know if you guys know this, they're actually hidden on a different YouTube channel, but we used to do Eve tours where we would actually get into the game and fly anyone who wanted to join us. And we would fly some space celebrities or people who knew stuff, historians and FCs would fly to battle sites. And as we were flying there, we would all start in Jita and we would fly to these, like we would go to BTAC-R. And as we're flying there, we would talk about what happened at BTAC-R. And then we would fly to right in the spot where it actually happened. So we went to Asakai and we had Boat with us and he explained what was going on then. And we had some people from Test with us, and then we did BTAC-R, and we had some historians with us. We actually flew through HiSec to the different trade hubs to describe the trade hubs. And as we were flying through the game or submarining, whatever you want to call it, we would stop at different systems and tell you the personality of those systems and history in those systems. And it was basically space tours. And we did that in the game, in the client, and it was actually a lot of fun. We only did like 6 or 7 of them, and then I thought I better do this better, you know. Oh, we went to Fountain. We were doing Fountain War, where I got smart bombed by some Tempest battleships that cut me off. So there's the stream sniping, but it doesn't matter as long as you get there. You can talk about the geography. So it was fine to get blown up. I think I got blown up twice in that. So there are only two Matterall corpse out there. I don't know if corpses, and I don't know if anybody has those, but yeah. So maybe we'll do that again. I've always wanted to go back to doing the battles, the battle tours of EVE Online, going to the system and talking about some of the history there with the people who were involved. That was pretty cool, but I can't do it yet. So instead, what we do is we talk about EVE Online from the outside, the statistics, and we look at what's going on, look for patterns, tell you what's happening with different groups. We get a lot of information, but we are not always able to give you all the details because time, have to read all the stuff, understand all the stuff, and then be able to explain it in a way that's accurate. It's not that easy. It takes a lot of time. So what we do is just look at these stats and we try to actually show you how to extrapolate what's going on in EVE Online so you could do it at home by looking at these same tools. And we always start with .lan. So with .lan, if we're looking at the most violent regions of the last 24 hours, in 00 space, you have Insmother in first place with a lot. That's 1,116 ships destroyed. In Delve at 838, that looks more typical for Delve. And Catch in third place at 669. Catch is the home of Brave. These two, number 2 and number 3, look normal, but number 1, Insmother, looks like something's going on there. So if we take, we'll go down to systems now in the last 24 hours because this number is informed by the systems. This region, Insmother, is informed by probably something that's going to show up as far as systems. And we're right. The very first place is a system in Insmother, and it is VDTAC-8, and 240 ships have exploded there in the last 24 hours. If we click on this, we will see Let's try that again and click on the actual name instead of the map. So we can see they have statistics for kills. That should be, looks like it's taking a second, but normally you'll see the graph for the last 36 hours or something, and you can see where ships have been destroyed, but it looks like Dotland, there it is. So if you look here, it jumps in the last, this shows you how big the fleets are that are coming in and out. So you had like 300 people moving in and out 42 hours ago, but we're looking at 24 hours, and here's these two spikes 24 to 48 hours ago. So that's 400 people jumping in, and then a little bit later you had basically 450 people. So that's about an 800 person fight. If you look at the kills, that same fight produced this major spike at about 24 hours, and that's about 200 casualties. And that was right about 24 hours ago. So they're going to start falling off our radar when we look at most violent systems in EVE. So this VD attack, that happened about a day ago. And the way we double check ourselves is we will go to Z killboard and type in the system. Normally you could link from Dotland to this killboard, but that seems to be slow and gets hung up a lot. So if we look at the last 24 hours, you can see a ton of pods, and that normally means the end of the fight, because people don't want to fly a pod home. They will let themselves get destroyed, or they will actually self-destruct. So you can see Pandemic Horde was in this fight. So we can just select any one of these pods, but just by clicking on the actual detail. And this will show us the pod information, but what we want to know is the overall information of the battle, not just this one experience with this pod. And there's this button here called Related on the top right, and if we click on that, it puts together all the related kills in the same place at the same time. And then you can start to see what may form into a picture of what the battle was. And you can see now involved in Team A, 98 players versus 100 players. That's Northern Coalition versus, looks like Fire Coalition. Because you have Legion of xDeath on the Fire Coalition side, you have Northern Coalition on the Pandemic PanFam side. So we know these two groups are actually fighting in those regions. I think this is it Unspoken or this Forsaken? I don't know. But there's a group that they're messing. NC is doing a lot of activity down in this area right now. Not always successfully, but they are definitely fighting in this area, and it's Cash and Insmother and those places. We'll check in more on that. I only have a few more minutes, so we'll go back to the statistics here. That's how we drill down. That's how we try to figure out what's going on. And let's see. I don't see anything else in the most violent systems in high sec that's super out of the ordinary. We were looking at Siberian Squad. It's now part of, I want to say it's part of Legacy, actually. Siberian Squad may have joined Legacy, I've heard. They are a Russian group. So I believe they took over Fate, was it? No, Tenerifis. Yeah, Tenerifis. They took that over from, I think, Legion of xDeath, or there was somebody else that was moving out. Okay, let's move out of this area to, we like to look at the kill board for 5 billion and above. Usually makes it interesting because sometimes you get a pod that's worth 5 billion like this one here. Rote Kapelle. So it looks like these two go together. It's the same pilot, so we'll say that's together, and that's a pretty good loss for him. That's 22 billion in a Marshal. That's a special rare Black Ops ship, and his pod in that was destroyed as well, and that was basically 6 billion-esque pod. So together, those things, let's zoom that in.
I just saw the officer fit Marshall and didn't see the pod.
Mm-hmm. Well, the Marshal was like 23 billion, but the pod is worth an extra 6. That's like a 30 billion loss for Jabari Gonzalez. From Rote Kapelle. And he was killed off by...
Marshall was probably worth a lot more since some of the mods were Abyssal, and I doubt they were bad Abyssals with all the officer stuff on.
Oh, I didn't see. Yeah, we should have looked at that. These are Abyssal mods are mutated mods that are unique. There is no other mod like that one because the statistics mutate. And he has like 3 or many of those actually. So it was probably very pricey. I don't know if we can see the statistics of the actual Abyssal mod. Let's take a look. No. So we don't know what the statistics were, but it wouldn't be on here if it was trash. So somebody lost a pretty unique ship. The value for those Abyssal mods won't be correct either. You can see it's valued at hardly anything. Because there's no way to interpret the value of the market since they are unique. There's only one in existence, and they're usually created or traded, or usually not sold on the market because the market, I don't think, can represent the uniqueness.
So you can make a guesstimate based on history.
I think you need to know. Oh yeah, but I mean, it would take some time to like put that together. Wild. That's a big kill right there, Rote Kapelle. Sorry about that, Jabari. Over the weekend, it looks like Goonswarm has several Rorquals that got chewed up, but it looks like from different people. So that's just a weekend in Delve.
Well, that was a hell of a jump freighter that died.
Where's that one? We'll wrap up with that one.
Next to the Marshall.
The Rhea? Oh, yes. That's huge. That's 54 billion in ISK. Let's see what it was carrying. It's got to be in cargo, right? Let's see. Oh, it's just a ton of stuff. Here's some.
That's a lot of stuff.
Just a lot of stuff. It's a lot of stuff, and it's expensive stuff too. So yeah, 64 billion. That's a huge loss. Yeah, I'm sorry I can't go through all this. It's just way too much, and I'm out of time. But when we get to the bottom, the cargo itself was worth. Oh, it just tells you what was destroyed. 17 billion worth of loot dropped though from this. So, well, listen. I mean, the ship itself is worth 8,300 million. Sorry, 8,300 million. So subtract that from basically 64 billion.
Quite a lot of that cargo was researched blueprints by the looks of it as well. So you can multiply some of those. So you might be looking at 60 to 70 billion in loss.
Okay, and that was. Oh, that was in. See, if you're flying through Narsia and you in a jump freighter, you're gonna get blown up anyway. This is a non-player corp, I believe, and it belonged to Reactive. Who, at this point, I would want to know who Reactive is, just because that's a lot of wealth. So I would go to Eve Who. It takes a second to get in. They have anti-DDoS software. So once you get in, you type in that name, that exact name. Oh, it didn't take. Let's grab it again. And there's the character, so we'll click on it. And what I like to do is normally in their career, they're usually on their own in the last 10 or 15 corporations or whatever. But occasionally down here, about their 5th or 6th corporation is when they're at the height of their gameplay. And that's when you can see who they belong to and stuff. So you can see that Xenobites, Colonel Panic Group. This is probably where he did his like real work. And I don't recognize those groups. So this might have been an alt of some sort in lesser groups, or Xenobites kind of sounds familiar, but I'm not sure. That might just be from the movie that I'm thinking. Hellraiser, I think it is. But you can see by this point here in 2012, this person is already like going in and out of NPC corporations and stuff. So looks like it's just an alt wealthy guy that was on his own, I think. Okay, so that's how we drill into who the pilots are and who got picked off. Sometimes you'll find the pilot belonged to you know, a big alliance, but only recently left, and that's when he got nabbed, that sort of stuff. So yeah, so that's a big kill. We will have to leave it there. I got to run. It's time to go. Thanks very much for joining us, and we will see you tomorrow with more EVE Online. Take care, everyone. Bye.